Hello, and welcome to another of my original short stories. Today I'm sharing something a little different. This piece comes from the opening sequence of an as yet unpublished fantasy novel, and although the book itself is still waiting in the wings, this particular story is one I'm very fond of, so I thought it was time to let it step out into the light on its own right. The wider story, for context, is set in and around the free port of Shayde, a place where the last remnants of a once great empire still cling on, surviving through piracy, hired blades, old loyalties, and whatever else keeps the fires burning. But this tale begins more quietly. It introduces us to Calli, a 13-year-old girl who, for now at least, is still simply a young goatherd trying to manage her herd on a dry and dusty hillside. So, let's settle in, and if you will, please join me for the story called The Thing About Goats. The trick with goats was to stop trying to tell them what to do. Calli found this out the hard way once her father, Bayon Thalansman, handed her the job of watching their small herd at pasture during summer days on the lower slopes of Hart Hill, the first of the Westerfangs mountains to rise above the small free port of Shayde. From where Calli usually sat on a tree stump in the middle pasture, she could look out over Fangfall Valley and, in the far distance, down over the spare and thinly clustered rooftops of Shayde itself. She could let her gaze drift down over the hazy green swelter of the marshes, known as Ladymere, and out into the distant curl of sky and sea that blended the world as one misty blur above the waters of Shayde Sound. The first time that she had taken the herd out from their overnight pens down by the family's mean little summer hut, the goats had appeared to obey her, and the dog, for the few minutes that it took to walk up the dusty lane towards the hillside pastures and the scrubby slopes of Hart Hill. The goats knew the tricks of the herding trade far better than Calli did. As soon as that day's alpha goat spied those scrubby slopes, the herd had veered off from the lane and charged up the steep slopes on the hill that bounded the meadows, looking for forage and browse. Calli tried to command Svena, her father's herd-trained guard dog, in a vain attempt to have the beast help her with the marshalling of the aberrant livestock. But Svena was a guard dog, not a herding beast, and at 10 years of age, Calli lacked the gravitas that such a relationship demanded. Apart from the warm and loving embrace of her mother, Calli's world then was made up of 12 goats, the source of almost everything good and tangible in her life, and she had let them run riot. Absolutely firm in the belief that her father would flay her alive, Calli spent a morning rushing about the hillside in desperate pursuit, scraping her knees and elbows on rocks and scrabbling across scree and dust. She scratched her arms and legs on thorn bushes, and all the while Svena sat at the foot of the slope, watching with an all-too-obvious sense of wry canine amusement as this strange woman-child flailed at the world. In those early days, Calli's attempts to girl-handle the goats into submission never worked, merely ending up in futile standoffs with one or other individual goat, while the other 11 animals carried on with their own sublime feeding agendas. Calli eventually came to the realization that her summer companions were simply fed up, settling into the same pasture day after day. They craved more than grasses and compacted sprays of clover, much preferring to hunt out the juniper, comfrey and star thistle that flourished on these scrubby lower slopes of Hart Hill Mountain. When the rush and the adrenaline of that first day's chase had finally abated, with the goats willfully ignoring her, so the slow, cold fear of her father's rage had started to swell in Calli's then 10-year-old breast. For a moment she was sure that she was heading towards a full-blown panic attack, and so she had simply given up, walked back to the pasture, and sat herself down under a rowan tree and sobbed her heart out. 30 minutes later, She lifted her wet eyes from her lap and noticed that all 12 goats were happily grazing alongside her in the bottom pasture. Svaina, too, had settled in a shady spot under a blackthorn tree a few paces away from where Calli lay, and appeared to be drowsing in the summer warmth that the hillside reflected. Over that first summer, Calli started to understand that goats must be goats. If she could identify the day's alpha and work to cajole and partner with that one goat, then the rest would follow. Through the many days that flowed through the next 3 summers, Calli grew up and came to realize that the goats were incredibly intelligent beasts. In some ways, as she came to see the world with troubled teenage eyes, she sometimes hated the goats because their lives were so much simpler than hers. Most of the time, though, she loved her bleating summer companions for that self-same simplicity of being, a simplicity that she could share in these drowsy moments under a sublime summer sun. Even now, though, and still scarred a little by that first sense of loss and fear, Calli continued to spend her summers counting the creatures and recounting them, always afraid that she would have to explain a lost animal to her father's flat-handed slap. Nonetheless, the proof that she was a competent goatherd stood all around her. Here she was, 3 summers later, herding 16 goats, with a quiet and content but greying Svaina now sat by her side under another late summer sun. Calli's one additional to her armoury, a trick designed to help her cajole the day's lead goat, was a gourd filled with dried beans. She could wave the gourd at her chosen goat as a physical sign of her intent, the beans rattling inside to add to the message, that message being something like, "Please, pretty goat, please, let's go this way together, for a while." Today was a peaceful day, a warm and drowsy day, with Svaina appearing to lay beside her mistress quietly and completely relaxed, as if wolves were a fiction and goats were inconsequential fleas on a canine backside. The goats, after their morning browse of the hillside sweets, were now collected together in the middle pasture, munching on vetch, grass and clover. Calli lived for these moments, moments away from the dark interior of her life. That previous evening, her father had returned from the inn, worse again for the local mountain dew, a corn liquor distilled by the innkeeper to add a kick to the bitter ale and the sickly sweet honey brew that he usually dispensed. Compared to some, it was a relatively quiet night, with just a few slurred but harsh words and a keep-quiet woman slap for Calli's mother. Then Beorn hit the pallet bed with a thump and snored all night, while Calli and Ignata shared the cot in Calli's curtained-off area in the hut, the girl spooning within the folds of her mother's soothing arms. Out here, on the hillside, under a towering blue sky with the Westerfangs rising and traversing the world behind her, with thin, delicate lacework wisps of cloud drifting in thin lines behind the peaks, Calli liked to let her young mind drift through a series of daydreams. Her dreams were gaining a little more focus. She was 13 and moving into womanhood, her time coming with each moon now, and that meant a shift in her world. Come the autumn, in just a couple of moon cycles, at the first day of the month known as Blood Moon, she would be sent to the Collegio for her assessment. Every child went by law. Every child was assessed and chosen, or not, depending on their aptitudes. The choosing was simple. After 2 years of general training, the children were selected at the age of 15 for a life lived by the book, by the sword, by salt, or by toil. For a girl, a life lived by the sword meant service as a bowmaid with the Banfean Dota, the young female fighters in the Shayde company. A life lived by salt meant service in boats, be they privateer boats built for war, or traders and fishers. For those chosen for toil, there was the trudge back to family and trade or the land, and whatever business or servitude that might entail. For a girl, the life of the book was not an open option. Calli burned with one single desire. She would join the Ban Fein Dota. Calli would become a bowmaid and join the great Shayde company and see a world beyond these old familiar hills and alleyways and stinking marshes. She would, she was sure, live a life of mystery and adventure far away from her mother and father, and when she returned, after serving the Lady of Shayde and her famed company, Calli would use her finely honed martial skills to kill Beorn, her sad, little man abusing father. Under that late and drowsy summer sun, the cold hard pull of revenge gave way slowly to a softening, and to a 13-year-old girl's flight of romantic fancy. She loved the old stories, and often told them to Sweina as they lay amongst the daisies and long grass ears, with the sound of flies and bees and buzzing things swarming around them. The goats bleated occasionally to remind Calli and Sweina of their duties, the odd neck bell ringing gently amid the summer drone. The possibilities in the fairy tales that she loved seemed limitless, just like the horizons that beckoned to her as a bowmaid. She leant up on her left elbow, reaching out to scratch Sweina behind her tufty ears, and the dog gave a low, contented purr sigh. Calli began another story. Today's little story, Svenny Dog, is one of our favourites. Shall we have the one about the warrior maiden again? I'm in the mood. What about you? Sweina nestled into Calli's knuckle as the girl needed the dog's inner ear, a sure sign for Calli that Sweina agreed with every hair and fibre of her canine being. Very well. A maiden. Let's call her Bella Demisha, because that was her actual name, Svenny, and she was a daughter of the Western Wilds. But, and here Calli paused for dramatic effects, fixing Sweina with a knowing look. She was really the true daughter of a Valkar queen and the unseen god of the Old Kingdom, who was called Olvata. Her mother was the first of the Valkar queens, the great Valkyra, and she raised Bella as a warrior. Bella grew up to be the finest bowmaid ever known. She could beat the strongest man with sword or spear or bow, and she served her mother and her godfather faithfully for many years. Calli paused to take a sip from her water bottle, and then cupped a drop in her hand for the dog to lick. Calli listened for a moment to the buzz of itinerant flies and hard-working bees, letting their whine and drone settle into her chosen narrative mind. She put the stopper back in the neck of the bottle and settled back, her head cradled by her hands, and went on with the story. One day, though, Bella had to fight against one of Olvata's great enemies. He was a young warrior from the far south, handsome and lithe and strong, with a tanned skin and jet-black hair. His eyes burned with fire and passion, and Bella fell headlong in love with him from the very moment that their fierce eyes locked together. She let him beat her, knowing full well that Olvata would be angry, but she so wanted this young man, and he too, she knew instinctively, had fallen in love with her from the moment they drew swords together. Now, Svenny Dog, Valkyra and Olvata loved Bella very much, and although they were angry with her, they could not bring her themselves to punish her physically. So instead they banished her from their service and took away her special powers with the sword and the spear and the bow, leaving her no more or less skilled than any other bowmaid. More than that, they decreed that she should marry a mortal man and live out her days as a mere woman. Bella was, of course, dear Svenny Dog, horrified by what she saw as such a harsh punishment. Worst of all, she feared that she would marry a coward of a man, someone so unworthy of her. Olvata's own heart was softening by now, so he took Bella to the very top of Demon Peak, far out to sea on the Ashen Isle. You know where that is, Svenny? It's the place where the exiles live today. Anyway, Olvata pricked Bella's finger with a thorn, a magic thorn that made her sleep and remain young for all the days that would pass until a hero came along. And to make sure that it would be a hero that woke Bella, Olvata called upon the molten rocks at the heart of Demon Peak, and they formed a ring of impenetrable lava around his daughter, a ring of razor-sharp fangs that only a hero could ever cross. And so it came to pass, after hundreds of summers, that Sagard, the boldest youth, a warrior proven in the darkest tremors of battle, toiled up the mountain to spy out the lands hereabout, so that he could claim a kingdom of his own. And there he saw the sleeping beauty that was Bella Domitia, and he knew that she must be his. Making a bridge of wishes and sighs, and laying such blessed boulders upon the land, he toiled for many days, until eventually he crossed that lava flow, kissed Bella on her ruby lips, and woke her from her cursed sleep. Then, while they stood on the mountain top, Sagard placed the magical ring Andravanata upon her finger in token of their betrothal, and he swore there and then to love her so long as their lives should both endure. Calli drifted into silence in the late afternoon drowse. That would, of course, be her life, she thought. Then Calli caught a drift of breeze carrying jasmine scent on the air, and felt rather than saw the shadows lengthen just a little. She sat up. Svena, too, stood and pricked up her ears. The goats were herding together, looking at them both, ready to start the walk back to their overnight pens at the family's rough summer home. Calli felt that endless sense of terror steal upon her as she contemplated her and her mother Agneta's life with a man lost to violence in his cups. Despite the warmth on the air, Calli shivered. What dread bruise would appear on her and her mother's souls tonight? Okay, that's The Thing About Goats from a novel, as I say, yet to be published. You can explore my fictional tales in print and in digital format through the links at the bottom of the screen and over at my website, details below, the website being clivegilson.com. If today's story stays with you, then please do like, subscribe, leave a comment and share with anyone who enjoys a good tale. If you do leave a comment, I will try to get back to you. That's it for now, though. So until the next story, please continue listening and take care until we meet again.